These films made generals vomit, got directors death threats, and triggered international diplomatic incidents. One sparked riots when viewers fled theaters during its premiere. Another was banned for 20 years after showing what nuclear war would actually do to your neighborhood. These aren't just controversial movies, they're the war films governments tried to erase because they showed too much truth. Number 1. All Quiet on the Western Front, 1930. This anti-war masterpiece was so realistic it got banned in Germany and triggered Nazi riots in theaters. Director Louis Milestone's adaptation of Erich Maria Remarque's novel showed the true horror of trench warfare through the eyes of young German soldiers who discover war isn't glorious. It's a meat grinder that destroys body and soul. When it premiered in Berlin, Joseph Goebbels led Nazi brown shirts into theaters, releasing rats and stink bombs while shouting, "Jewish film," at the screen. They physically attacked patrons and destroyed the theater. Within days, the film was banned across Germany for damaging German honor. Despite winning the Oscar for Best Picture, the film faced censorship worldwide. In France, all scenes showing French brutality were cut. In Austria, riot police had to protect screenings. In America, multiple states demanded edits of excessive cruelty. The Nazis later burned Remarque's books and revoked his citizenship. Universal Pictures spent a then astronomical $1.25 million, but the film's unflinching portrayal of war's futility made it one of cinema's most important anti-war statements, and got it suppressed wherever militarism was rising. Number 2. Paths of Glory, 1957. Stanley Kubrick's anti-war masterpiece was so damning of French military leadership that France banned it for nearly 20 years. The film portrays French generals ordering a suicidal attack, then court-martialing their own soldiers for cowardice when they inevitably fail, culminating in their execution to cover up command failures. France banned Paths of Glory outright from 1957 to 1975. The French government considered the film anti-military and refused to allow screenings. They extended that ban to French colonies and even pressured neighboring countries. In Belgium, theaters had to run a disclaimer saying the story was fictional and not meant to insult the French army. West Germany refused to screen it during the late 50s. Switzerland held off until 1978. Franco-era Spain banned it until 1986. The U.S. military blocked it from being shown on American bases abroad. That was the Cold War climate. Too anti-authority, too embarrassing for allies, and too soon. The ban meant that for nearly 20 years, most of the world never saw it. Kubrick was barely into his 30s when he made it. Kirk Douglas led the cast and fought to get the film made. He called it a picture that would always hold up, and he was right. Years later, Douglas said, "There's a picture that will always be good years from now. I don't have to wait 50 years to know that. I know it now." Number 3. The Great Dictator, 1940. Charlie Chaplin's satirical attack on Hitler was banned across Europe and nearly destroyed his career in America. This bold comedy portraying Hitler as a bumbling madman was made when the U.S. was still neutral in World War II, and powerful isolationists tried stopping its release. When Chaplin refused to back down, J. Edgar Hoover opened an FBI file on him, beginning decades of harassment. The film was immediately banned in Nazi Germany and all occupied territories. In neutral countries like Spain, Portugal, and Argentina, governments blocked it under German pressure. Even in Britain, officials initially worried it would damage relations with Germany before Churchill personally approved it. In America, isolationist senators threatened to introduce legislation blocking the film's distribution, calling it war propaganda. Despite the massive backlash, Chaplin invested $2 million of his own money in the production. The gamble paid off commercially, earning $5 million at the box office. But the political fallout helped trigger Chaplin's later exile from America during the McCarthy era. Years later, Chaplin admitted, "Had I known of the actual horrors of the concentration camps, I could not have made fun of the homicidal insanity of the Nazis." Number 4. The War Game, 1965. The BBC commissioned this fake documentary about nuclear war, then immediately banned their own film for 20 years. Peter Watkins created this chilling portrayal of what would happen if Britain was hit by nuclear weapons. mass casualties, radiation sickness, societal collapse, martial law, all filmed with documentary realism using real statistics from actual civil defense plans. But just before broadcast, the BBC freaked out and pulled it. They officially claimed it was too horrifying to air on TV, but really it was pressure from the British government, especially Harold Wilson's administration, terrified about causing public panic. Internal memos later revealed government officials feared it would undermine the UK's nuclear deterrent policy by showing its futility. Shot documentary style with real statistics from actual civil defense plans and featuring non-professional actors, the whole thing cost less than £50,000. And even though it never aired as intended, it actually won an Oscar for Best Documentary in '67, despite not technically being a documentary at all. When finally broadcast in 1985, critics called it the most important film ever made. Stanley Kubrick reportedly studied it extensively while planning Dr. Strangelove. Strangelove. Number 5. Come and See, 1985. This Soviet war masterpiece made Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan look like a Disney cartoon. Director L.M. Klimov's unflinching Holocaust drama follows a teenage boy through Nazi-occupied Belarus, witnessing unspeakable horrors that literally aged the young actor on screen. The filmmakers fired live ammunition over the actor's head during filming. No special effects, just actual bullets whizzing inches away. Critics unanimously call it the most devastating war film ever made, but audiences couldn't handle it. At Venice Film Festival screenings, viewers physically fought each other trying to escape the theater. One British tabloid called it a panoply of depravity, too brutal for human consumption. Despite winning major awards, the film made less than $72,000 in America. Soviet authorities initially tried suppressing it for showing the true face of war rather than heroic propaganda. Even today, film students report nightmares after watching it. Martin Scorsese personally championed its restoration, calling it the war film that makes all others look like games. Number 6. Soldier Blue, 1970. This ultra-violent Western shocked audiences with its explicit depiction of U.S. cavalry massacring Native Americans, a thinly veiled Vietnam War allegory that got butchered by censors worldwide. Based on the historical Sand Creek Massacre, the film flipped the Western genre by portraying American soldiers as brutal killers of innocent civilians. Soldier Blue hit theaters like a tomahawk to the skull. Based on the Sand Creek Massacre, this anti-Western flipped the script on the entire genre, showing U.S. cavalry as brutal killers slaughtering innocent Native Americans. The final 20-minute massacre sequence shocked audiences with scalping, beheadings, and children being gunned down in graphic detail. Director Ralph Nelson fought the studio system to keep his vision intact. "I wanted to show the Vietnam War through the lens of the frontier," he said. At an early preview screening in America, the audience reaction was so strong, people literally started yelling, "Burn the theater," because they were so disturbed by the violence at the end. British censors demanded extensive cuts, especially to scenes where priests are executed. The American release was even more heavily censored, with nearly 14 minutes removed. Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, the film cost $3.5 million to make, but pulled in over $8 million. Quentin Tarantino later cited it as a major influence, saying, "It was the first time I saw a Western that made me physically ill." Number 7. The Men, 1950. Fred Zinnemann's unflinching portrait of paralyzed war veterans showed the brutal reality of what happens after soldiers come home broken. Starring Marlon Brando in his film debut as a bitter, suicidal paraplegic veteran, the film showed PTSD, sexual dysfunction, and the crumbling of marriages, topics Hollywood had carefully avoided in war pictures. Military officials pressured the studio to add a patriotic message or hopeful ending. But producer Stanley Kramer refused. Several theater chains declined to show it, calling it anti-military and depressing. Veterans groups were divided, with some praising its honesty, while others condemned it for showing heroes as bitter, broken men. Shot on location at a real veterans hospital with actual paralyzed veterans as extras, The production was so intense that Brando lived in the hospital for a month and learned to maneuver a wheelchair from men who'd never walk again. Though commercially unsuccessful, making only $800,000 on a $1.1 million budget, the film changed how Hollywood portrayed war's aftermath, finally acknowledging that victory parades weren't the end of the story for those who fought. Number 8. Johnny Got His Gun, 1971. Dalton Trumbo's directorial debut was so disturbing in its anti-war message that theaters refused to show it, despite winning at Cannes Film Festival. Based on Trumbo's own novel, it tells the story of a young soldier who loses his arms, legs, face, and ability to communicate, kept alive as a medical experiment while trapped inside his own mind. Roger Ebert once said he wasn't really into anti-war movies. He thought they were usually preachy and didn't really stop wars anyway. And at first glance, Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun seemed exactly like one of those films. Came out of Cannes with a bunch of awards, critics praising its message. It looked pretty heavy-handed and preachy. But actually, this one's different. It tells the story of a young American soldier, Joe, who goes off to fight in World War I. He gets caught by an explosion, wakes up in a hospital bed. No arms, no legs, no face. He's stuck inside his own head, unable to communicate. People never really got to see it. The film's distributor, Cinemation Industries, was tiny and they went bankrupt almost immediately after the movie's limited release started. Plus, it was the early 70s. The Vietnam War was happening, dividing everyone. And this film was definitely not what casual audiences wanted. Trumbo, who had been blacklisted during the McCarthy era, mortgaged his house to fund the film, but it remained largely unseen until Metallica used clips in their One music video decades later. Number 9. The Grand Illusion, 1937. Jean Renoir's masterpiece about World War I prisoners of war was so powerful that both Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy banned it, with Goebbels declaring it cinematographic enemy number 1. The film portrays French and German soldiers as victims of class systems and nationalism, rather than enemies of each other, a message that terrified militaristic regimes. When Nazi forces occupied France in 1940, they seized and destroyed every print of the film they could find. Renoir fled to America, believing his masterpiece lost forever. The film's original negative traveled a remarkable journey, hidden in France, confiscated by Germans, shipped to Berlin, captured by Russians, and finally rediscovered in the 1960s in a forgotten Toulouse film archive. Despite attempts to suppress it, the film was nominated for the first ever Academy Award for Best Picture. President Franklin Roosevelt declared, "All democratic people should see this film." The Nazis considered its humanist, anti-nationalist message so dangerous that destroying it became a priority during wartime, perhaps the ultimate testament to cinema's power to challenge militarism. Number 10. Duck, You Sucker, 1971. Sergio Leone's revolutionary epic got butchered so badly in America that it's practically a different film. This story of an Irish explosives expert and a Mexican bandit during the Revolution features firing squads, mass graves, and execution scenes that United Artists executives found unbearable. Released as A Fistful of Dynamite stateside, this story of an Irish explosives expert and a Mexican bandit during the Revolution features firing squads, mass graves, and execution scenes that United Artists executives found unbearable. The original European cut includes a flashback showing military police hanging villagers from trees and gunning down families that was completely removed from American prints. Another sequence showing Rod Steiger's character finding his children murdered was cut to shreds. Leone was furious, saying, "They keep the explosions but remove the reasons for them." The film cost a hefty $5 million, but only made about $4 million in its butchered American release. European audiences saw Leone's full vision, and the film grossed over $20 million there. Even cut, Roger Ebert recognized its power, writing, "This is the most emotionally complex Western Leone ever made." The complete 157-minute version wasn't available in America until decades later, revealing Leone's devastating critique of how revolution devours the innocent. Number 11. The Oxbow Incident, 1943. This bleak Western about a lynch mob was so contrary to wartime morale that 20th Century Fox buried it on release. William Wellman's stark film shows ordinary Americans becoming murderers when swept up in mob mentality, a message that horrified studio executives trying to promote wartime unity and patriotism. The film shows three innocent men hung by self-appointed vigilantes who ignore legal process, an allegory for fascism that was too uncomfortable during World War II. Studio head Darryl F. Zanuck argued with Wellman about the downbeat ending, threatening to reshoot it with the mob stopped at the last minute. Wellman threatened to quit, and Zanuck eventually relented, but deliberately gave the film minimal marketing. Released with little promotion in 1943, it lost money for the studio, making only $750,000 on a $1.2 million budget. Zanuck buried it in limited release, but critics recognized its brilliance. Years later, Henry Fonda called it the film I'm proudest of, and it's now considered a classic examination of how easily civilized people can embrace barbarism, exactly the message wartime America didn't want to hear. Number 12, The Hill, 1965. Sidney Lumet's brutal portrayal of a British military prison was so harsh that UK officials tried blocking its release. Sean Connery, desperate to break free from his James Bond image, plays a prisoner in a North African detention camp, where soldiers are deliberately broken through sadistic punishment, including being forced repeatedly to climb a man-made hill in desert heat until they collapse. This isn't a battle movie. No D-Day landings, no tanks, no explosions. What The Hill gives you is something grimmer, a psychological war between prisoners and their jailers inside a British military prison in the Sahara. Sean Connery took this role specifically to get as far away from James Bond as possible. He plays Joe Roberts, a soldier locked up for refusing to send his men into a suicidal fight. He's stuck in a cell with a handful of other court-martialed misfits, and they're all at the mercy of a sadistic sergeant major who runs the place like his own personal war zone. The hill in the title is exactly that. A brutal incline in the desert they're forced to climb over and over with full gear in the heat as punishment. Things go south fast when one of the prisoners is pushed too far and dies, and the power struggle between inmates and officers hits a boiling point. The film didn't do much at the box office, but critics got it. Ray Reige's screenplay won at Cannes. Woody Allen called it one of the greatest American films ever made, and Sean Connery, despite the film's lack of commercial success, considered it a personal triumph, as it led to more challenging acting roles in the future. These weren't just controversial films. They were truth bombs governments tried to bury. War is ugly, brutal, and rarely heroic, but Hollywood usually sells us sanitized versions where good guys win cleanly. Which of these censored masterpieces shocked you most? The real question might be, were these films banned because they were too violent, or because they showed uncomfortable truths about our history that we still haven't fully confronted? Drop your thoughts below.